For more than a century, the world has been told the same story about the Great Pyramid of Giza. Millions of stone blocks, thousands of workers, massive ramps stretching across the desert. But what if that explanation is incomplete? What if hidden among the ancient temples of Egypt is evidence suggesting that the builders possessed a forgotten method of moving stone? One so extraordinary that modern science is only beginning to understand its principles today. Could sound have been used to lift massive blocks into the air? Why do certain ancient inscriptions appear to describe stones rising without ropes, sledges, or human force? And why do some researchers believe crucial clues have remained overlooked for decades? In this investigation, we will examine mysterious inscriptions, remarkable engineering achievements, modern acoustic experiments, and one of the greatest unanswered questions in human history. By the end, you'll have to decide for yourself whether the pyramids were built exactly as we've been told, or whether a far older secret may still be hiding in plain sight. The Great Pyramid remains one of humanity's most astonishing accomplishments. Built from an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, many weighing around 2.5 tons, it continues to challenge engineers, historians, and archaeologists alike. Traditional theories explain the construction through ramps, sledges, and highly organized labor forces. While these explanations account for much of the process, some researchers argue that certain aspects of the pyramid's precision remain difficult to fully explain. That debate becomes even more intriguing when attention turns to a series of unusual inscriptions found within ancient Egyptian temple complexes. According to alternative interpretations, these carvings may depict something far more than religious symbolism. They may preserve clues about a forgotten technology, one centered around vibration, resonance, and the extraordinary power of sound. To understand why this idea continues to fascinate researchers around the world, we must begin inside one of Egypt's most enigmatic sacred sites, where a mysterious image carved thousands of years ago still raises questions that have never been fully answered. Deep inside the ancient temple complex of Abydos, one of Egypt's most sacred religious centers, there are carvings that have puzzled independent researchers for years. Abydos was not an ordinary temple site. It was associated with kingship, death, rebirth, and the myth of Osiris. Pharaohs came here to connect themselves with the divine past of Egypt. Every wall, every symbol, and every inscription was carved with purpose. But one particular section has attracted unusual attention. According to alternative researchers, a chamber connected with the reign of Seti I contains a carved scene that does not appear to fit the surrounding ceremonial imagery. Instead of showing only gods, priests, offerings, or royal rituals, the scene appears to show an object with a structured form. It has been described as a central cylinder, open at the top, with repeated curved projections around its body. Above it, a rectangular stone-like form appears to hover, separated from the object below by empty space. To mainstream Egyptology, unusual temple images are usually interpreted through religious symbolism. A strange object may represent divine power, ritual equipment, or a mythological concept. But to those who read the image through an engineering lens, the arrangement suggests something different. They argue that the carving may not be showing a ceremony at all. It may be showing a process. The central object resembles a container or resonating chamber. The repeated curved forms around it could be interpreted as vibrations or emissions. The stone-like shape above it seems to be positioned as if acted upon by an invisible force. This is where the mystery begins. If the object was meant to represent a physical device, what was it doing? Why would ancient artists show empty space between the object and the stone? Why include details that appear mechanical rather than purely religious? The controversial interpretation is that the carving preserves a memory of a sound-based lifting system. Not a modern machine, not an electrical device, but an ancient resonant apparatus that used air, vibration, and controlled acoustic energy to reduce the effort required to move heavy stone. Of course, this claim remains outside mainstream archaeology. There is no accepted academic consensus that ancient Egyptians used acoustic levitation to build pyramids. Yet the idea refuses to disappear because it touches a real scientific principle. Sound can move matter. And once that fact is understood, the strange images at Abydos begin to feel less like fantasy and more like a question still waiting for a serious answer. At first glance, the idea sounds impossible. How could sound lift stone? Most people think of sound as something we hear, a voice, a musical note, or the vibration from a speaker. But from a scientific perspective, sound is actually energy moving through a medium. It travels as pressure waves, creating areas of compression and rarefaction in the air. Under the right conditions, those pressure waves can exert force on physical objects. This phenomenon is known as acoustic levitation. In modern laboratories, researchers have demonstrated that carefully controlled sound waves can suspend small objects in midair. Tiny beads, droplets of liquid, and lightweight materials can be trapped at specific points within a standing wave field. These points act like invisible pockets where the forces pushing upward balance the pull of gravity. The result is remarkable. Objects appear to float with no visible support. Even more impressive, scientists have learned how to move those objects through space. By adjusting the frequencies and phases of multiple sound sources, researchers can shift the position of the pressure field itself. The object follows the movement of the field, almost as if guided by an invisible hand. This is not science fiction. In recent decades, research teams in Japan, Europe, and the United States have successfully demonstrated increasingly sophisticated forms of acoustic manipulation. Some systems can rotate objects. Others can move them along precise paths. A few can even manipulate multiple objects simultaneously. However, there is an important limitation. The objects involved are typically very small. Most successful demonstrations involve items weighing only fractions of a gram, or, in more advanced experiments, several dozen grams. This is still an extraordinary achievement, but it is a long way from lifting a 2.5-ton limestone block. And this is where the debate begins. Supporters of the ancient acoustic theory argue that modern science has already proven the principle. They believe the only remaining question is scale. If sound can lift a small object today, could a far more powerful system lift a larger one? Skeptics disagree. They point out that increasing lifting capacity by thousands or even millions of times presents enormous engineering challenges. Generating enough acoustic energy to suspend multi-ton stones would require technologies far beyond anything currently demonstrated. Yet regardless of where one stands in the debate, one fact remains undeniable. Sound possesses physical power. It can shape matter, move objects, create resonance, and produce measurable forces. Ancient builders may not have understood these effects through mathematics or modern physics, but they certainly understood vibration. They lived in a world filled with musical instruments, resonant chambers, stone architecture, and carefully designed sacred spaces. The question is not whether sound can affect matter. The question is whether ancient civilizations discovered applications of that principle that have since been forgotten. The mystery surrounding the pyramids becomes even more intriguing when modern science enters the picture. For centuries, stories about stones floating through the air belonged to the realm of myth and legend. But during the 20th and 21st centuries, researchers began conducting experiments that demonstrated something once thought impossible. Sound could be used to suspend matter against gravity. One of the earliest significant demonstrations came through research involving acoustic manipulation in controlled environments. Scientists discovered that carefully arranged sound waves could create stable pressure zones capable of holding small objects in place without physical contact. The implications were extraordinary. For the first time, a force that was completely invisible could be observed lifting material into the air. As technology advanced, the experiments became more sophisticated. Researchers at the University of Tokyo developed systems capable not only of levitating small objects, but also of moving them with remarkable precision. By coordinating multiple ultrasonic emitters, They could guide suspended objects through three-dimensional space. Observers watching the demonstrations often describe the movement as almost magical. Objects drifted left and right. They rose and descended. They followed invisible pathways through the air, yet every movement was governed by measurable physical laws. Meanwhile, researchers in Europe continued pushing the boundaries of acoustic engineering. Teams working with high-intensity ultrasonic arrays demonstrated the ability to levitate increasingly heavier objects than had previously been thought possible. Although the masses involved remained relatively small by construction standards, the experiments proved an important point. Acoustic levitation was not merely a laboratory curiosity. It was a real phenomenon capable of producing predictable and controllable effects. For alternative history researchers, these developments were significant because they seemed to mirror descriptions found in certain ancient traditions. Stories of stones being moved without direct contact suddenly appeared less fantastical when viewed through the lens of modern acoustics. Of course, a critical distinction must be made. No modern experiment has demonstrated the levitation of pyramid-sized stone blocks using sound alone, not one. Current technology remains far from achieving such a feat. Yet supporters of the theory argue that scientific breakthroughs often begin with small-scale demonstrations before expanding into larger applications. They point out that powered flight, space travel, and wireless communication were once considered impossible as well. Skeptics counter that scaling acoustic levitation from grams to multiple tons may involve obstacles so immense that the comparison becomes unrealistic, and they may be right. Still, these experiments accomplish something important. They force us to reconsider assumptions. They show that sound is not merely something we hear. It is a physical force capable of interacting with matter in ways that continue to surprise even modern scientists. As researchers explored these possibilities, attention returned to one of the most astonishing engineering achievements ever created: the Great Pyramid itself. Because if any ancient structure has inspired questions about forgotten technology, it is the monument that has stood on the Giza Plateau for more than 4,000 years, defying time, weather, and explanation. Long before theories about acoustic levitation emerged, the Great Pyramid of Giza had already earned its reputation as one of the greatest engineering mysteries in history. Even today, thousands of years after its construction, the monument continues to inspire both admiration and debate. The numbers alone are staggering. The structure contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. Many weigh around 2.5 tons, while some of the granite blocks used within the interior chambers weigh dozens of tons. These materials were transported, positioned, and assembled with a level of precision that still impresses modern engineers. Standing originally at approximately 146 meters, the Great Pyramid remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. That achievement becomes even more remarkable when one considers the tools traditionally attributed to its builders. According to conventional understanding, workers used copper tools, stone hammers, sledges, ropes, and carefully designed ramp systems. Through organization, manpower, and decades of labor, they transformed millions of individual stones into a monument of extraordinary scale. Many archaeologists consider this explanation sufficient, and there is substantial evidence supporting the use of ramps, sledges, and large labor forces throughout ancient Egypt. Yet certain questions continue to capture public imagination. How were the heaviest stones transported with such consistency? How were blocks positioned so accurately at increasing heights? And how was such remarkable alignment achieved across a structure of this size? The Great Pyramid is aligned to the cardinal directions with astonishing accuracy. Its base is nearly level, despite covering an enormous area. The joints between some casing stones were so precise that they became legendary among later observers. To many researchers, these accomplishments demonstrate the brilliance of ancient Egyptian engineering. To others, they suggest there may be additional pieces of the story that have not yet been fully understood. This is where alternative theories begin to enter the discussion. Some propose lost construction techniques. Others suggest advanced knowledge of geometry, resonance, or natural forces. A few researchers go even further, arguing that the builders possessed technologies that disappeared long ago. Among these theories, acoustic manipulation remains one of the most controversial. Supporters argue that if a method existed for reducing the effective weight of stone, even temporarily, many logistical challenges would become easier to solve. Massive blocks could be positioned with greater precision. Fewer workers might be required for certain tasks. Construction could proceed with a level of control difficult to achieve through brute force alone. Critics remain unconvinced. They point out that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A hypothesis, no matter how fascinating, cannot replace physical proof. And that is precisely where the mystery remains today. The pyramids unquestionably exist. Their precision is undeniable. Their scale is breathtaking. But the exact methods that produced one of humanity's greatest monuments continue to inspire questions that have never completely disappeared. If there is one aspect of the Great Pyramid that continues to fascinate both scientists and alternative researchers alike, it is the structure's remarkable acoustic behavior. Unlike most ancient monuments, the Great Pyramid is not simply a pile of stone blocks. Hidden within its massive exterior are carefully designed chambers and passageways that create unusual acoustic effects. Visitors who have entered the king's chamber often describe a unique sensation. Even the slightest sound seems to linger. A whisper can travel unexpectedly. A low-frequency tone can produce vibrations that are felt as much as heard. This is not imagination. Engineers and acoustic specialists have long recognized that enclosed stone chambers can act as resonant spaces, amplifying specific frequencies depending on their dimensions and materials. The king's chamber is particularly interesting because it was constructed using enormous blocks of granite. Granite is not an ordinary building material. It contains quartz crystals, and quartz is known for its piezoelectric properties. Under mechanical stress, quartz can generate tiny electrical charges. In modern technology, this principle is used in clocks, sensors, radios, and countless electronic devices. Alternative researchers have often pointed to this fact when discussing the pyramid. Could the builders have intentionally selected granite because of its acoustic and vibrational properties? Was the chamber designed merely as a burial space, or did it serve another purpose entirely? No definitive answer exists. Yet the questions persist because of several unusual observations. One of the most frequently discussed involves resonance frequencies measured within the pyramid's internal chambers. Some researchers have suggested that certain dimensions naturally amplify frequencies near ranges considered significant in modern acoustics. Among these, the number 111 Hz has become particularly famous within alternative history circles. Supporters of the acoustic theory claim that this frequency appears repeatedly in measurements associated with the Queen's chamber and surrounding spaces. They argue that resonance at specific frequencies could have interacted with stone, air pressure, and vibration in ways not fully appreciated by conventional archaeology. Mainstream scientists, however, urge caution. While resonance is real, there is currently no accepted evidence that the chambers were designed to generate levitation effects. Resonance alone does not prove the existence of advanced technology. Even so, the architectural precision remains remarkable. The builders created chambers, shafts, and passageways with extraordinary accuracy. These spaces interact with sound in measurable ways that continue to attract scientific interest today. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because when researchers compare the pyramid's unusual acoustic properties with ancient stories describing vibration, sound, and the movement of massive stones, they begin to wonder whether the relationship is purely coincidental. Perhaps the chambers were intended for religious ceremonies. Perhaps they were designed for symbolic purposes. Or perhaps the ancient builders understood certain principles of resonance far better than we currently imagine. Whatever the truth may be, one fact remains undeniable. Thousands of years after its construction, the Great Pyramid continues to reveal new questions every time science takes a closer look. And with each discovery, the possibility grows that some aspects of ancient engineering remain hidden beneath layers of history waiting to be uncovered. Every great mystery eventually leads to a deeper question, not how something was built, but who first possessed the knowledge to build it. Among the most controversial claims surrounding ancient Egypt is the idea that the civilization inherited portions of its knowledge from an even older source. According to certain inscriptions, myths, and later traditions, some of Egypt's greatest achievements were not inventions of a single dynasty, but the preservation of wisdom passed down through countless generations. Alternative researchers often refer to this concept as the mystery of the first builders. The phrase appears in various forms throughout ancient traditions. Some interpret it as a reference to the earliest architects and engineers of Egypt. Others believe it points toward a forgotten civilization that existed long before the pharaohs. Mainstream historians reject these conclusions, arguing that the evidence remains insufficient. Yet the persistence of the stories continues to intrigue researchers. Part of the fascination comes from the enormous gaps that exist within the historical record. Ancient Egypt lasted for more than 3,000 years. During that immense span of time, countless documents, technical records, architectural plans, and religious texts were created. Yet only a fraction survived into the modern age. Entire libraries vanished, countless scrolls decayed. Wars, invasions, natural disasters, and political upheavals erased enormous portions of humanity's written memory. One of the most famous examples is Alexandria. The ancient city became home to one of the greatest centers of learning ever assembled. Scholars from across the known world gathered there to collect knowledge on mathematics, astronomy, engineering, medicine, and philosophy. Much of that knowledge disappeared. The destruction of libraries throughout antiquity created historical blind spots that can never be fully recovered. Because of this loss, some researchers wonder whether ancient engineering methods may have been documented in texts that no longer exist. Not advanced machines in the modern sense, not futuristic technology, but practical techniques, specialized knowledge, and construction methods that gradually faded from memory over centuries. This possibility becomes especially interesting when examining Egypt's monuments. The pyramids appear suddenly in history with a sophistication that continues to impress modern observers. Their geometry, planning, and execution suggest a civilization that had already mastered complex construction principles. Knowledge of that scale does not emerge overnight. It develops through generations of experimentation, success, failure, and refinement. So where did it begin? Who were the teachers of the first architects? Who developed the methods that eventually produced monuments capable of surviving thousands of years? No definitive answers exist. What remains are fragments, a mysterious inscription, an unfinished record, a legend preserved through centuries, a monument still standing beneath the Egyptian sun. Together, they form a puzzle whose missing pieces may never be recovered. Yet those missing pieces continue to inspire one irresistible possibility: that somewhere in humanity's distant past, knowledge existed that has not survived into the modern world, leaving only clues carved in stone and questions that refuse to disappear. At the heart of this entire mystery lies one critical question: could sound actually lift the massive stones used to build the pyramids? It is a question that sits at the intersection of archaeology, engineering, physics, and speculation. Those who support the acoustic levitation theory point to several intriguing observations. First, sound is a proven physical force. Modern experiments have repeatedly demonstrated that acoustic fields can suspend objects in midair. Researchers have shown that pressure waves can counteract gravity under carefully controlled conditions. Second, Ancient civilizations possessed a far greater understanding of practical acoustics than many people realize. Across the ancient world, builders designed theaters with extraordinary sound projection. Sacred chambers were constructed to amplify specific frequencies. Massive stone structures often display acoustic properties that appear surprisingly sophisticated. The Egyptians themselves were masters of architecture, mathematics, and engineering. Supporters argue that it would be unwise to underestimate what they may have discovered through centuries of experimentation. Third, proponents claim that certain inscriptions and traditions seem to describe processes involving vibration, resonance, or the movement of heavy stones through unusual means. While these interpretations remain controversial, they continue to fuel debate. Yet there is another side to the argument, a very important side: the skeptics. From a scientific standpoint, the greatest challenge facing the acoustic theory is scale. Modern acoustic levitation works. That is not disputed. What is disputed is whether the same principle could be expanded from lifting tiny objects to lifting stones weighing thousands of kilograms. The energy requirements would be enormous. The engineering difficulties would be extraordinary. No surviving device, blueprint, workshop, or physical artifact has been discovered that demonstrates such capability. For many scientists, this absence of direct evidence remains the strongest argument against the theory. They point out that ancient Egyptians left behind tools, quarries, unfinished monuments, worker settlements, transportation evidence, and numerous clues about construction practices. These discoveries support conventional explanations involving ramps, sledges, manpower, and careful planning. In other words, the mainstream model already has evidence. The acoustic model largely relies on interpretation. And interpretation alone is rarely enough to overturn established historical conclusions. This is why the debate remains unresolved. Neither side possesses a complete answer. Supporters of acoustic levitation argue that unusual evidence deserves further investigation. Critics argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Both positions contain valid points. What makes the discussion so fascinating is that it forces us to confront a larger truth about history itself. The more we learn about the ancient world, the more we realize how much remains unknown. The pyramids continue to stand as silent witnesses to an age that still guards many of its secrets. Whether sound played a role in their construction or not, the question itself reminds us that human ingenuity, both ancient and modern, may be far more remarkable than we often imagine. More than 4,000 years have passed since the Great Pyramid first rose above the sands of Giza. Empires have risen and fallen. Languages have disappeared. Entire civilizations have faded into history. Yet the pyramid remains. Its immense stones still challenge our understanding. Its precision still impresses engineers, and its secrets continue to inspire questions that refuse to die. Did the ancient Egyptians build these monuments using ramps, sledges, and extraordinary human determination? Or did they possess knowledge of vibration, resonance, and natural forces that has since been forgotten? At this moment, no one can say with certainty. What we do know is that ancient civilizations were capable of achievements far greater than many people once believed. Every year, new discoveries force historians, archaeologists, and scientists to re-examine old assumptions and ask new questions. Perhaps one day, a forgotten inscription, a hidden chamber, or a breakthrough in modern science will finally reveal how these incredible monuments were truly built. Until then, the mystery remains open. And maybe that's what makes it so fascinating. The Great Pyramid is more than a monument. It is a reminder that humanity's past still holds secrets waiting to be uncovered. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration into one of history's greatest mysteries, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us for future investigations into the lost knowledge, forgotten technologies, and unanswered questions that continue to shape our understanding of the ancient world. Because sometimes, the greatest discoveries are not the answers we find, but the questions we dare to ask.